Um, all right, right. I don't know if I'm supposed to have an intro here or something.
No, I mean, I think we just introduce ourselves and maybe talk like what is the eight essentials, and I would say, then we go into, you know, I guess like who you're bringing on or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
or we just flow,
yeah. Sounds good. I can try like a little intro.
Yeah.
I'm Ethan Rue with Eight Essentials. This is a nascent project where we're trying to find interesting people, do a little interview, like a little quick zoom into their daily life, and then also get some product recs from folks who have put stuff through their paces, things they rely on, just what do they use every day. A little bit of an experiment as our first attempt at a podcast here, joined by Cam French. Cam, introduce yourself. How do you describe what you do?
Okay, so I'm Cameron French. I've known Ethan since high school. I am a former Marine and former Hotshot from Region Two. I did 3 years on the Craig Hotshots, and yeah, uh, like to talk about the origin. This is how I started. So um, when I was stationed, I was a former sergeant in the Marines, and when I was stationed in Germany, I was applying for positions within law enforcement and fire and whatnot. And because of my history, I was not allowed into the law enforcement at the time. And
Anything more there to say,
well,
but let your imagination fill in the gaps. That's where the fire.
well, I'm not a convicted felon or anything like that, but the requirements for law enforcement at the time were pretty stringent. And at the time, I was based out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and I was trying to get in on the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. And I made it pretty far, and they just decided to go with someone else. And so I started kind of looking elsewhere. When I got out of the military, I went into the service industry. I was a bouncer at a club or at a bar off South Howard Avenue in Tampa. And then I moved over to a restaurant in Clearwater where I became a bartender and whatnot, and decided that, hey, why not try a fire? So I pretty much used the VA to the post 9/11 GI Bill through the VA to get into St. Petersburg College, where I went right into this EMT fire structure set. And so I went through 3 months of EMT, which was a huge learning curve for me because I had like practically no medical experience aside from maybe a combat lifesaver course in the military. And went right after that, we went into 3 months of structure fire. So graduated from the Structure Fire Academy, and while we were in it, we had I think a 1 or 2 week training block where we touched on wildland because there actually is a huge national forest down there. The Everglades, and
Yeah,
they do have you know Florida has their own wildland like service, right? And I really, really enjoyed that portion of it. And so,
did you?
now
Was like you went to the Everglades? You spent time out there, and
no, we went to Tampa Bay State Park, I believe it was, and we conducted a prescribed burn. And and I really enjoyed it. And I started following all the Wyoming hot shots and all these other Instagram accounts. And
yeah,
I've of course watched the movie with Josh Brolin in it about the hot shots, and I was like, oh my god, like I have to go and do this. And so I went out and I, I started talking about it, and of course the training cadre in the structure academy weren't like really thrilled because, you got to think these are guys that represent different organizations throughout all of the state of Florida that are kind of like vetting you,
Yeah.
and, um, I guess like me being, I think it was because I was older, um, that I graduated as like class president, and so it was like their top guy, at least for that training cycle, didn't even have any interest in going into a Florida State, fire capacity.
Right.
I didn't want to be employed with the state of, or with any municipality in Florida.
Right.
So, like,
Yeah, is there just for a little bit of context? My impression is that Hotshot is like uh, in a usual calling, like even among fire, and then there's like I try to think of the analogy, but sort of like you go to a like a CrossFit gym, you're very good, and you're like, oh, like, Ken, we love having you. And you're like, actually, I want to go fight MMA, and they're like, oh, well, that's like a lot harder and not necessarily something we do here.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And not only is it, now it's pretty typical. If you're, on the West Coast, it is an option. It's something that people know about because these fires happen in people's backyards, like literally, you know. I've been in people's backyards fighting wildfires, just crawling down the mountain and stuff, and preventing them. Um, but it is unusual for someone maybe from the very southeast, in a fire college or whatever, in the fire academy, to be like, I want to go 20 or 2,000 miles away and fight fire and not even do structure. So, um, so yeah, I got some pretty negative feedback from the training cadre, not to, throw shade on them at all. It was just very, I think, unexpected. And, even the wildland guy facilitated the wildland portion of the academy was kind of like, you're too old to be a hot shot. You'll never make it on a hot shot crew.
How old were you at the time?
I was 30 years old.
Over the hill. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I remember, I'll name him. I don't care. He's one of it. My buddy Josh Pendergast. He kind of like had to hold me back from kind of saying something that I shouldn't, because I like couldn't believe this guy. I'm like waiting to see this guy this whole time
Yeah.
and pick his brain, and he just was like, "You can't do it. There's no way."
Yeah. I don't know what the timing was, but depending on when you're in depth there, you're like, Tom Brady just won the Super Bowl. But,
Right.
it's years on me. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And and that was one of many negative kind of interactions that I had. Some people kind of joked around about it, like, "Oh, did you watch Only the Brave?" You're like, and just kind of like talk crap on me about it. But I stayed the course, and there were some of my preceptors, guys that I shadowed for 12 hours at a time for certain departments over there. And they exactly know who they are, that believed in me, and I will never forget them for that.
Yeah.
And I stayed the course, and, and the feedback from my peers was, go and do it, man. Holy crap. Like, this sounds awesome. I can't believe that you're going to go and do this thing. So, stayed the course, got out of the academy. My buddy is getting picked up by, St. Pete Fire, all around. And I just applied to around 50 different places, on USA Jobs that surrounded wildland fire. That's all I was, just hand jam my resume into USA Jobs. Tried to find I even entertained the idea of doing some type of like almost unpaid internship in a very remote area. Like I just wanted to be in.
Yeah.
And my options for Hotshot crews at the time were very, very slim, because the Forest Service hires very early and the BLM hires a little bit later, Bureau of Land Management.
In like in the year.
In the year, right?
Yeah.
And so um, I I would miss out on the 2019 season, but be qualified for the 2020 season, right?
Okay.
Or 2018 season. I would be qualified to start in the 2019 season. And
Okay.
so
What is just for kind of when does the season run? I mean, I'm guessing if it's over the summer. uh,
so it varies, give or take, depending on what region.
okay.
We call it the GAC. It's the geographical area of command and control, and it kind of varies. But at least for region 2, which is like the Rocky Mountain region, it starts kind of mid to the end of April and goes until like mid and September, and that's for temporary employees, right?
Okay.
So if you're a permanent employee on the GS 4 or 5 level, you're going to be coming in, and I'm sure I'll kind of butcher this, but you're going to come in about 2 pay periods before and stay about 2 pay periods after. But as a temporary, entry level employee, no contributions to your thrift savings plan, which is, it's federal. It's the same as military. So I'd be putting it right back into the pot. But as a temporary employee, you don't get to do that. You don't really get healthcare benefits year round and stuff like that. You are guaranteed so many hours, and it's something just above like 1,000 hours that you're guaranteed, right? And so, but again, in different regions, it kind of varies. There's like 3 East Coast crews, maybe 4. There's Medeo and Hotshots. There's 1 in North Carolina, and then there's Jackson out of Mississippi, and there's Cherokee out of Tennessee. Those guys do I don't want to just throw this umbrella statement out, but they do a lot more prescribed fires.
Mm-hmm.
So they do a lot more like mitigation stuff.
Yeah.
On the tail end of their seasons or whatever. So you're going to see that their seasons last like a little bit longer.
Okay.
So it depends. It depends on where you're going.
Yeah.
But pretty much I ended up submitting my application to, I think, between like 6 and 8 crews. One crew that was Forest Service, I won't name them, but they were set, they kind of informed me that one of the BLM crews was going through a kind of command restructuring, and they didn't really recommend going to that one just yet until kind of dust settled. So I kind of crossed that off the list right off the bat. But I ended up getting a call back from 3 different crews, one of them being Craig. And long story short, I ended up showing up to Craig on like April 26th of 2019. Just
Yeah. And that's really what. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand this. So, first you face quite a bit of adversity in the application process. It seems like the resume is sort of like you have a history of doing things that are hard and physical. You do firefighting training that is based structural. It sounds like it's meant to be primarily urban.
Yeah.
And then you get bit by the bug while in. You're trying to find a way in. You get a call back, and is it like, show up in Colorado, we're going to put you through your paces?
So to even dive a little bit further,
Yeah.
I was kind of given bad information by someone. I got a lot of callbacks, and it's because there's a huge demand for work out there, right?
Yeah. Living in Northern California, my sense is there is a lot more fire than there are people to fight.
Right. No, you're totally correct. And with my veteran status and because I had EMT, and that was the only reason I was eligible to be on a hotshot crew. And so to get on a different crew that wasn't a type one um, hotshot crew, you know, at least I think my application kind of stood out. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. But I was picking up the phone all winter long, but to dive into the nitty gritty of it, I was given bad information from someone. I can't even remember what part of the country he was at. Um, Pretty much said, we're not hiring right now. They're required to give a call out. And, in that conversation, they were like, they pretty much said, because I was asking them and I said, how do I get, what do I do? Like, do I say yes? And then when does the paperwork start filing in? Like, do I just show up? I know it's like, it's very foreign to me. He goes, say yes to everyone until you get paperwork in front of you. And I did, and it kind of bit me later on because Jackson actually kind of picked me up, but Craig was it picked me up as well. And I started to show up on two different rosters for the
Right.
2019 season. I'm conscious of this going on, and I'm starting to kind of like sweat, like, where am I going to end up? And, one day I got called up, and the assistant superintendent, acting superintendent at the time, he knows who he is if he listens to it. Yeah, he was pretty irritated by this, but he had no idea I didn't know what I was doing. I
Yeah.
didn't really express that I didn't know what I was doing. It was our second conversation. I didn't really know how things go. I didn't know like any etiquette as far as, the whole wildland thing it goes. And so we kind of like hashed it out. And I joke with him nowadays. I said, you kind of bullied me into it, it's kind of like, if you don't come here, I've come for you,
Yeah.
and
Great.
since that, we've gone on to have a wonderful operational relationship and a personal friendship as well.
Yeah.
And which I'm very grateful for, considering the amount of his life that he's dedicated to the job. I mean, I'm very fortunate to be in good standing with
Yeah.
that person,
Yeah.
and to be able to make up for my like essential screw up,
Right. Right. Before then, like getting into the details of once you get to Craig and what goes forward, knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently to get there?
I would have done a lot more research. I felt very wet behind the ears coming into this, and I probably would have reached out a lot more.
Yeah.
I can't say that there was that much available as far as information goes, like to get started. And it was only, or maybe I just wasn't oriented in the right direction.
Mhm.
And it was only until I was in that I started to see this huge push in social media being a major recruitment factor.
No kidding.
Yes, for a lot of crews. You
Yeah.
know, I feel like I think I experienced in my first season kind of the tail end of how things used to be.
Mhm.
And then, in the middle of my first season, I saw a radical change in how things are, became, which
Yeah. That's wild. So someone we like, should they start DMing hotshot crews on Instagram?
right. Oh, I was doing that. I mean,
No kidding.
I was fortunate enough to get a little bit of like a buddy of mine, he knew a smoke jumper pilot. Um, I forget where I think she was out of Boise, and she kind of like led me along the way. But she almost was just more of like a friend, you know.
Mhm.
It's not like she put me in contact with crews, but I don't think she realized that people weren't in the Forest Service weren't necessarily hiring just now. She was just doing the best she can, you know.
Yep.
So I was fortunate to kind of make that connection. Did it kind of clear the air? Not enough, for sure, you know,
Yep.
because I ended up following the wrong recommendation.
Yeah.
Almost,
Which is essential to overcommit and then have to unwind something.
yeah, to backtrack and almost cost me what I consider the opportunity of a lifetime.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That is wild. Okay. So now fast forward, get to Craig. Do you have the job at that point, or is there actually like, welcome to the physical challenge? You need to pass the gauntlet, in 3 minutes, or we're not actually interested.
Right, right. And I'm gonna be careful to not reveal too much because
Sure.
part of being on a hotshot crew, um, is every single one of them have their own individual culture. And then, obviously there's a hotshot crew, and it's, the hotshots have kind of like their culture as an umbrella, right? And so when I first showed up, I mean, I packed everything. You know, my father had passed away like 6 months before that or something like that, 7 months. We sold all their stuff. My sister was pregnant. I literally packed everything that I owned, my Colorado, and took it with me. I mean, and I was lucky enough that they actually had housing. Craig is like one of the best compounds because there's physical training there. The engines are attached to them. The field office is right down the street. Um, and the barracks are right there. I mean, it's really a great place to operate at. So when I like showed up, it was recommended that we go hike the training mountain. And I mean, up until that point, I mean, you go from pretty much 0 feet above sea level to, I think Craig said that about 6,400, right? And up until that point, I had never been challenged like that, and so we would just train on the mountain. I think I hit it 3 or 4 times before day zero, of the season.
When you say hit it, you mean you're like tip to tail?
Hike it,
Yeah.
yeah, hiking it with nothing, hiking it with a tool, hiking it with your line gear. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Increasing weight on the back to.
yeah,
Yeah.
hiking
And
it with,
were you working out before this? Where you like you knew it's coming, and even though you're not at elevation, before you get to Colorado, you're like out on the road running. You're lifting weights. Or you what do you do to
yeah,
before you get there?
yeah, and so I did have a training regimen. I was working out at Strength Camp in St. Pete. It's kind of like this. It's not exactly CrossFit, and it's not exactly bodybuilding. It's kind of the mix of the two. So I was taxing my cardiovascular system, but also, um, building strength.
Hmm.
Um, and there's only so much you can do. And, it is recommended that if you're going in to your first season of wildland in any capacity, just pick something and stick to it. And again, I'll reiterate, it is more important to find your ideal body weight that you can comfortably live at
Hmm.
and work your legs and lungs, right? All of the saw strength, carrying a saw, carrying a tool, all of that there's no way to really prepare. You're not going to swing a sledgehammer 1,000 times a day. You're not, because that's just preposterous, right? You're not, there's only so much you can do. You can't really prepare for 16 hours on the fire, and how do you prepare for that?
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, so it's a lot of rucking, a lot of running, um, weights, you name it. Just find something and stick to it. And you'll be successful. You're gonna have that learning curve no matter what.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Makes sense. Maybe for broader perspective, how many people in any season are on a hotshot crew?
So
Like you have one specifically, and then how many, across the country?
it's around 18 to 22.
Okay.
So
Per team.
at least I can only I only have experience with one crew.
Mhm.
And for us, it's gonna be one superintendent, it's the top dog, two assistant superintendents, two squaddies. We call them squaddies or squad leaders. So that's Alpha and Bravo. And then we're going to have a couple of senior firefighters underneath them.
Mhm.
Guys that have been in 3 to 5 years, something like that. Maybe came from the engines. I had a guy that came from, hell attack, and
Yeah.
just a variety, fire mods, stuff like that. And he worked their
What
way.
proportion of those are year round, and what proportion are like they're on for the season then off?
So, from my understanding, it's off season, and
Okay.
except for the superintendents and all of the command staff. Everyone else is just you're carrying a tool or you're carrying a saw.
Hmm.
Those are primarily the temporary
Okay.
equipment, right?
And is that because the superintendents, like they also have to build the team, they also have to be recruiting, and it's like it's a full time thing to make sure you have people ready.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And there's, they have qualifications that they're trying to work on year round,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. But that's like really nitty gritty stuff. And
Yeah.
I'm not a superintendent. I couldn't tell. I couldn't necessarily tell you,
Yeah.
but yeah, those guys are on year round.
Makes sense.
Now they're not necessarily fighting fire year round,
Sure.
but they're there.
Yeah.
So it signs out for them,
Makes sense.
which is good and bad.
Yeah.
Part of the allure of being a temporary part-time, like, Sawyer is, or just regular wildland guy, the engine operator or whatever, is that you work 6 months on, and then you go,
Yeah.
and you're not working for 6 months.
Right. All meat and potatoes. Like you just do the intense stuff.
Right. But again, it comes at, like I said, it's good and bad. It comes at a cost. You're not getting all these benefits year round. You're not employed year round. You got to collect unemployment or find another job. Like
Right. Right. Yeah. What's common in the other, like the off season?
a lot of guys take trips to like Costa Rica and like Peru.
What's common? Trying to make that paycheck last. That's what's common.
Yeah. It's called being hotshot rich. Like the day after you got, $40,000 in the bank, I don't know, what would you do if you were that?
Right. Yeah. You haven't been spending a lot of money up there on the mountain. Yeah.
Right. And so, it all depends on who it is. I mean, there's ski bums there that go and ski and work the mountain as kind of like an EMT on the mountain.
Right.
Just whatever, some guys go surfing for, a month in Costa Rica or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a cool place to be because people come from so many different backgrounds and have so many different things that drive them, and have an idea.
Yeah.
Ideas of how their lives want to look like.
That makes sense. How did it compare to the Marines? Just in terms of the personalities attracted or the types of folks.
Well, I joined the Marines during. I sound like old saying that. I do.
To be clear, you're in your early 30s.
Yeah. I joined the Marines in kind of a different political climate.
Okay.
It was kind of I come from very liberal very liberal background. The Marines at the time were very, very right, and I don't want to separate the I don't care. That's just the way it was. It's a very conservative kind of climate to be in. Now hot shots, I mean, there are no unfit hot shots, right? There are unfit Marines there, you know, and so the physical demand,
But then you like someone has to be behind a desk, and
right,
if you do that too long,
but it's a much larger organization.
sure,
The military. There's a lot more people or capacities where they need people in. Um, so I guess the people that are drawn hot shotting, they come from a wild background. I mean, from all over, but they all kind of have that wanderlust kind of lifestyle, just kind of living by the seat of your pants. And um, yeah, I mean, but they all work hard. I mean, you couldn't pick out in a line who's going to be the strongest and who's going to be the one who works the hardest. I mean,
right?
it's the most unpredictable group of people you've ever met. You would never think that these group of people would be hanging out, but they are, and
Yeah,
they become the greatest friends, greatest in family.
yeah. Well, it is. It strikes me as very unusual to have an organization that is 100% operators.
Right.
Like I guess as you mentioned, the superintendent has some admin duty, but it's like everyone is doing the physical thing. Like everyone is doing the thing. There's like
No. Oh no. The superintendent is hiking you into the
Well, no, I mean, but it's like, yeah, they had, part of their job is also like on the phone,
Right, right,
building
right.
roster and all that. But
Right,
it's like
right.
there is no one who is, purely like, oh, I do the mailroom.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Absolutely. Everyone, it's crazy because it seems like the older they get, the gnarlier they are. You know,
I was going to ask about uh, maybe the dichotomy between being told that 30 is too old to start,
Mm,
but also it sounds like there are folks who stick around for a while because they are some combination of like love it and just exceptionally tough.
right. Yeah. I mean, it it just showed that guy didn't know what he was talking.
Mhm.
I mean, you're talking guys looking at 40 that I don't know. I mean, I would never touch them as far as my physical capabilities. And I did 8 years.
Yeah,
And, like it was the most physically demanding thing I ever did. And not just their physical prowess, but their mental as well.
Mhm.
Like total tacticians. I mean, at their very core. I mean,
Yeah. Maybe the guy who
yeah.
gave you that advice just wanted to quickly fill a roster spot and
I mean,
or
yeah.
there's something to move
I
on.
mean, yeah, it kind of, he's still kind of, I don't even know what that guy's name anymore is, but I'm still like,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's funny how you have those things in life, right? Where it's it becomes a big motivator, or like I'm gonna prove this person wrong or this idiot.
yeah,
And you're like, yeah, I think I have some of those people, and I wouldn't recognize their voice if they called me.
right, exactly.
Yeah, but the experience sticks with you. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so maybe like before we get into some more details, one last question. Um, Anything before you got there that in retrospect was a significant miscalculation or a real misconception going in?
Well, I guess, going in, I didn't really know what to expect.
Mhm.
Um, I thought my first year we would be on a lot larger fires. We were not. Um, I underestimated my physical capabilities. I underestimated my mental strength.
You underestimate. You
I underestimated. Yeah. I can I can look at all 3 seasons and kind of pinpoint my transformation as a man through those 3 stages, is I'll call it year 1, 2, and 3.
yeah.
Uh, year 1, I came in, I was prideful. I had some trauma and grief I was dealing with, some personal things that weren't, like I said, weren't copacetic to the lifestyle, weren't conducive to the lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
My support system wasn't really that great at the time. And so, my first year, I made some mistakes interpersonally, um, not totally, I think for the most part, I did a good job. I built some very strong relationships. Um, I cut my teeth. I found my grit, I guess, and I was invited back. Not everyone was, you know. Um,
Do you know what
it's
the attrition rate is year over year?
well, that would be it. I couldn't even tell you the number.
Yeah.
I know that going into the 2019 season, um, we were our uh, returnees, the rate of returnees was pretty low.
Hmm.
I kind of have an idea of why,
Yeah.
and that's personal, to
Sure.
them.
Okay.
And,
None unreasonable to think that 6 months fighting fires a year
right, is a
becomes tough to swing, from when you're
right,
doing things.
right, and it's not one single person or anything like that. That's not the reason. It's kind of everything, um, and but it did improve
Yep.
over those. I would say the 2020 season we had a bunch of returnees, so we were thicker than thieves. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, you know, um, and again, that was my 2019 season, and then 2020, um, I was able to, kind of figure some things out in my personal life and really, really enjoy being out there alone with your buddies
Hmm.
capacity. You work in a capacity where it feels like you're doing the most important thing in the world,
Yeah.
because, you're face to face with some pretty, uh, treacherous situations, and it's like no one knows about it but you know, and no one back home does this sort of thing. Um, and so yeah. But again, like I said, living that life, like it comes at a cost. Not everyone's situation is really great for that sort of work, for that sort of lifestyle, for that career. It is a very rewarding. I mean, you picture, you're going out there with 20 of your buddies, a small group of them are like family to you, and you're just out there with no cell service, just in the most vast, beautiful areas, seeing, nature take its course. And um, in those situations, I think if you're a thinking person, I'm very like self-reflective. In during those times, I really found out what was important to me. When everything's stripped away, you find out what's important to you. And yeah, totally. So I don't want to like ramble and go down like a rabbit hole.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure nothing is better for beating a social media addiction or or whatever it is. Um,
Right. And for me, it was like, you know, I was getting over, the death of my father, and some relationship issues, and I was fairly like new to sobriety. And so it was kind of like frayed wiring going on in my brain. So I was really trying to make sense of a lot of things in my own life outside of that. And um, like I said, I found my grit. Um, I found what I think to be the most important, what I believe to be the most important things in my life.
Mhm.
Um, and I was able to uh, gain some type of, I guess, indirect mentorship, kind of like picking up where I think like my father left me off with. Um, there were situations where I some of my command were very fatherly to me, and I was like the oldest one as far as one of the oldest, and temporary. But I felt like a little, I felt like a lost boy, and they kind of recognized that a lost boy. But I also am working with guys 10 years younger than me that are looking for interpersonal direction. So I'm giving them that. I'm like receiving that from my command, and so I'm kind of losing my train of thought, but um,
No, I think that's great.
all right.
I think that's uh, I have I've never done anything, nearly as certainly physically demanding or
Right.
as like, literally removed from kind of, the
Mhm.
daily bustle or the temptation to like jump on PlayStation or something.
Right.
But I think I can understand the pattern of you do this thing where you're finding friendships where you're literally relying on folks,
Mhm.
in life or death situations, and it's also just it is. Uh, it, how could it not like transform your perspective if it is all of your time, it is all of your physical effort, it is all of your mental effort, like it is, you're directing that towards being excellent at this one, like, one enormous thing that is like literally,
Right.
the full breadth of the horizon in front of you. That's
Totally.
really cool.
Yeah. I think it's a really great opportunity to see what you're made of.
Mhm.
I don't think you have any idea. You're not gonna. I don't think you're gonna find that in a gym.
Yeah,
You
makes
know,
sense.
I don't even know if I found that during my time in the military.
Mhm.
I mean, I would consider those 3 years on Craig as like a very pivotal moment in my life.
Mhm.
I was derailed, by my father's suicide, and the people and experiences on Craig interagency hotshots placed me back in a position where I could finally orient myself in the direction of achieving my potential as a man, right? And that time made me sure of that. It made me sure that I wanted a family of my own, that I wanted to ground myself somewhere, and that I still had a lot left to give someone else, you know?
Yeah.
Right. I feel like I found my worth there.
Yeah.
But there's a flip side to that, right? Because it becomes such a part of who you are that when you leave, it feels like a divorce, right? And a lot of my buddies who were in for 3, 4, 5 times longer, talk about how what are they supposed to do? What kind of skills do I have? What can I offer the world? How can I provide for myself? I've only been a hotshot. I only know wild. And that's how you kind of get, as we say, dogged in to this kind of identity crisis, um, when you start to look at options outside of this, right?
Mhm.
And so, and that's what I mean. That's what I mean by it's kind of, there's a flip side, and it does
Yeah,
it does come at a cost because you do have to start over when you leave here,
makes
right?
sense.
In like I said in the reel, in our first conversation, I got out before it grabbed hold of me because it will grab hold of me because, like I said, it is a great. I mean, I mean, there's some of the best years of my life. It was the most immersive, amazing experience I had as a young man. I recommend everyone do something like that. Get out there, get out there and go find out like what is important to you. Go put your mind, body, and entire life at risk. And you're going to find out, what you need to do in life and who you need to be.
Right.
Just don't let it take over to the point where, you know, everyone in your life is suffering but you because, you have I don't know, this selfish pursuit of, I don't know, of this, like, I don't know what to say to that, but,
Second time in the same conversation, I think of Tom Brady. Um,
yeah,
uh,
right. It
yeah,
comes at a cost. I guarantee he would say the same thing. It came at a cost.
yeah, yeah. No,
Compare myself
sure,
to the
sure seems
GOAT.
to have. Yeah, yeah.
Not to compare us to the GOAT, but man, all of those immersive, selfish pursuits, if you want to call it that, or just pursuits of adventure
Yeah,
and the next best thing, they come at a cost, and usually it involves someone else's heart.
right.
You know,
Could you? Did you see that? I mean, I don't know what to call like the come down or the re-enter or whatever it is. It's like, was it like it was clearly going to be every marginal year was getting harder? Was there a sense of that where it's like, well, I'd love to do it for a fourth year, but that just means it's like, what once I get out, it's like I'm gonna it's a ladder's a little bit higher. I got to come down off.
oh man, I was so my whole like persona disagreed with every bit of that first season. Like physically, mentally, I had a rough first season mentally. I mean, my situation at home like allowed me to sleep maybe 4 hours a night, and and
Yeah,
um, and so I was one of the first to be like, I'm not coming back.
yeah,
And it's funny because from our last conversation to now, I was thinking about saying exactly this, and that, and it is funny that you asked that question because I was one of the first to be like, I'm not coming back. But they say you every month you forget 10% of the bad stuff that you went through,
yeah,
you know, and so by the 6 month mark, you've forgotten more than half of the bad times, and you're ready and you only remember, the good times, like, you know, sitting around a campfire, cooking meat on sticks and everyone's smoking rollies and, dipping and having a good time. And we're all, we have like just black on our faces and we just got done doing saw maintenance. This guy had a close call and, it's like you look back on that and you're like, man, hiking Cedar Mountain sucks bad, but I think I might show up for next
yeah, yeah, yeah.
year. That's what happened.
That's funny.
Yeah. 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 And so that's kind of like the cycle that you go in, you're like, oh, I can't wait for the season to start. And as you start the season, you're like, ah, screw this,
Right.
you know. So
Yeah.
everyone's eager for the season to start and everyone's eager for the season to end.
Right.
You know, it's just a
Funny.
vicious cycle.
When did you know you were good at it?
I don't think I ever really knew that I was good at it.
Okay.
I always assumed that I joke around. I joke around with a lot of people today, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you were in the Marines." I was like, "Yeah, I was the world's okayest Marine." I don't think that I was the best. And the same at Hotshotting, man. Like, um, I would say that I was okay. I was okay at it. You know, I was fortunate enough to get on a saw, so I was good enough to get on a saw. But even that first season, I barely went into the saw shop. It's kind of this like sacred area where saws go, and I won't shed too much light on that. I didn't feel like I rated a saw, it being my first year in wildland, period, because a lot of people don't get to be on a hotshot crew their first year, and I think it was just slim pickings, my veteran status, and EMT that allowed me to do it. Um, and really, I had a hard time keeping up in the runs. There were some of them I couldn't even perform, you know, uh, and that's from like injury leading to not being able to train hard as hard. But, um, you know, um, I would say I never, I never really like knew that I was great. I mean, I think the people beside me, or if I was ever great, but the people beside me, I like knew were kind of, were the real deal, you know?
Mm.
I mean, light years ahead of me. Guys 10 years younger than me, just light years ahead of me,
Yeah.
you know? I again, I can't ever say that I was really all that good. But I mean, you might talk to another guy, and I can give you a couple names of like specific people you should talk to,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my strong suspicion is that I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of folks you worked with said that about themselves while giving accolades to their buddies.
Right,
Like we're,
right, right. Yeah. I don't think you should ever. Yeah, everyone slops off. Everyone
yeah,
has like returnee syndrome, where you're no longer the FNG. You're kind of the 2-year guy. Then you're the 3-year guy. You're like, I don't need to do that. That's for first years and stuff like that. So when you're in it, you kind of have this like, everyone's a little bit prideful, some more than others. I'm certainly no exception. Um, but now that we're talking about it, yeah, I would agree. Like they're going to say the same thing. I don't think anyone, even like the top guys, are not going to be like, I'm really good at this, But my buddy is. Maybe he
right,
says,
right. Yeah, yeah. Even if empirically, it's like, I mean, you've been doing it for like you're the one teaching everyone else. Like,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
yeah, that is yeah, that's cool.
Mhm.
Really cool. Um,
Wildland, and not even specifically hot shotting. Not a lot of people, some people don't want a hot shot, man. Like I said, Wildland is was a great opportunity, um, for me to deal with some of those trials and tribulations. Like I said, I was very lost and very derailed, and they placed me back on the tracks. Um, and it's a huge part of my life. It's a huge. I left on very, very good terms. Um, and to answer your question, I did I did plan on coming back for a fourth season, but it was just my fiance Jen, she has 4 children from another family, or from another man. And in order for me to seriously, you know, to be taken seriously in this, but I really had to come home and be a father to them in some capacity, and not to say that, hot shots are dads, hot shots are sons, daughters, everything. Not to say they do a bad job, but for me to be effective, I had to come home. And for me to be an effective partner, I had to come home. I can't do it from afar. Not in this relationship. Some work, but not in what is my soon to be marriage. It's just not.
Yeah.
I've toyed with the idea of coming back. There's a crew out of Chicago um, that my former superintendent was a part of, but I think it would be moving in the wrong direction for our goals as a family. Uh, but I always had intentions of kind of doing this thing, and she really screwed those up.
Makes sense. I mean, but really maybe it might like amplify the, kind of bittersweet feeling, but what better to be pulled out towards something you're
Right, right.
excited about, right? That to get to the end of the road to be like, body can't do it anymore. What's next?
Yeah,
What's next or whatever it is. And, then you're just
yeah,
staring at this.
yeah. And a lot of there's plenty of guys that are facing that right now.
Yeah.
They can't do it mentally. They can't do it physically anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. I don't
Yeah.
think anyone should blame them. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. Hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the best sign off, right? Is when,
Yeah.
when there's longing for like one more episode or one more season
Yeah.
or, whatever it is. That's,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, that's the best time.
Yeah. Totally. And
Yeah.
and I suck the life out of it, man. It's part of who I am every single day. I get asked questions all the time about it. It's great. And for those that want to listen, I'll tell.
Yeah. Yeah. And, especially given how it seemed like a big, what is honestly an unnecessary challenge along the journey was just getting the right information.
Yeah.
Uh, to be clear, I'm humble about the size of the audience that this is going to go out to. But can folks reach out to you, like throw you an Instagram DM or something?
Absolutely.
Nice.
No, totally. I've kind of that's already happened.
Nice. That's great.
That's yeah. I'm happy about that.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes. So I think that's probably good right there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that is great. I can stop the recording. Where is it?